This is one, and I'm not just saying this because you're sitting here. This is one of the best families I know, and I've known this family now, for
over
20 years?
Way over 20 years, yeah.
20 years, and to see your...
Most people in the gospel music world know Michael Tate, lead singer of DC Talk. Jesus freak. 30 years of arenas. Now fronting the Newsboys. What almost nobody talks about is that his sister has been out singing him on YouTube for a decade. 88 million views on one performance. More than any DC Talk video. More than any Newsboys record. More than anything Michael Tate has ever recorded. Her name is Lynda Randle. She grew up in the same house in Washington, D.C. Same parents. Same faith. Michael went to arenas. Lynda went to Gaither homecoming stages. And Bill Gaither, who watched her on those stages for 25 years, just said publicly what he saw in her.
First time I ever heard you sing, Lynda, was at a women's retreat. And I came home from that retreat and I said, I heard a girl today who is an incredible communicator.
The cab driver's daughter. The story of Lynda Randle does not begin on a stage. It begins in Washington, D.C., with a family that almost did not survive long enough to have her. Her parents were not Christians when they married. They separated when their oldest son was still young. Her mother took the boy and moved away. Her father remained in D.C., driving a cab. Then one day, alone in that cab, he accidentally switched the radio to a Christian station. He heard the gospel. He pulled over, prayed, and asked for forgiveness. He called his wife, shared what had happened. The family was reconciled, and her father became a bivocational pastor who still drove a cab to pay the bills. Lynda was born into that rebuilt home, the middle of 7 children in the inner city, watching her father preach on Sundays and drive strangers to their destinations the rest of the week. The neighborhood was not gentle. She grew up on a block where she could look out the front window and see the reality of what happened when people had no one looking out for them. Across the street lived a man named Bobby, a pimp, and the women who worked for him. Lynda was 12 years old when she walked across that street and sat with one of those women, a woman named June, and asked her why she let Bobby beat her. June said it was because Bobby loved her. Lynda, 12 years old, told June that was not love, that God had plans for her life, that there was something better. That was the same year her father led her to the Lord at the kitchen table. She said yes, and then spent the next 4 years trying to live life her own way before she finally surrendered everything. There was more happening inside that home than the street outside could touch. A female family member abused Lynda for a number of years. The abuse left her questioning things about herself that no child should have to question. About how God had made her, about her identity, about whether she had a purpose at all. She has spoken about it publicly, carefully, without embellishment. She says those years of pain are exactly what gave the songs their weight. She had planned, once, to go into fashion design. She had been sewing since she was 12. She had plans for cosmetology, too. She graduated from Liberty University in 1989, married her husband Michael Randle the same year, and settled in Kansas City, Missouri, where Michael would eventually become a pastor. None of that is what happened to her voice. What happened to her voice came from everything before Liberty University. God on the Mountain. There is a song that defines her career, and most people who love it do not know the full story behind why she sings it the way she does. God on the Mountain carries a theology that fits on a single index card. Life has valleys. God does not abandon you in them. The God who met you on the mountain is the same God walking with you when you cannot see the path. Simple. The kind of truth that can feel like a cliché until someone sings it the right way, at which point it stops being a cliché entirely. Lynda Randle sings it the right way. She does not push the song. She does not run the notes into the ground or chase the emotional reaction. She trusts the lyric and lets it breathe. And because she trusts it, the audience trusts her. What most audiences do not know is what she was carrying when she learned to sing it that way. In a 2-year period, Lynda lost a sister, a brother, her father, and 2 uncles. 5 people. In 2 years. The song did not just become her signature during that stretch. It became the thing she held on to when there was nothing else to hold. Then her mother died. 70 days after her mother passed, Lynda Randle stood on a stage and performed. She talked about her parents planting positive words into her life. She sang God on the Mountain. She did not cancel the event. She showed up. That is what 88 million people have watched without knowing they were watching it. Not a polished performance, not a trained vocalist hitting notes. A woman who lost nearly everyone she loved and kept singing the song that told her God was still there. The recording traveled everywhere. Hospital waiting rooms, nursing homes, a car on a highway at 2 in the morning. People called radio stations asking who that voice was. They passed the recording between friends the way you pass something you do not have words for yet. Most of the people in those rooms had no idea what she had buried before she sang it to them. They just knew it reached somewhere that other recordings did not. She had written none of the song, composed nothing. She had simply delivered it from the only place it could be delivered from honestly. Bill Gaither had that voice on his stages from 1998 forward. He watched the rooms go quiet every time. He watched what it did to people who were carrying their own valleys, and he said almost nothing about it publicly for more than 2 decades.
Mike, you and I have something in common. We are both married. We're both married to strong women, right?
Amen.
The world she stepped into. When Lynda Randle joined the Gaither homecoming world in 1998, she was stepping into a franchise that had become one of the most commercially successful operations in American Christian music. The Homecoming video series had launched in 1991. By 2004, the Homecoming tours were selling more tickets than Elton John, Fleetwood Mac, and Rod Stewart. 22 platinum albums. Rolling Stone had named Bill Gaither one of the 50 richest musicians in the world, the oldest name on that list. But the world Lynda walked into in 1998 was also still recovering from a wound. 4 years earlier, Michael English had built his career as the Gaither vocal band's lead singer before going solo. By 1994, he was the biggest name in gospel music. 4 Dove Awards in a single night. Artist of the Year, Male Vocalist. He was the voice Bill Gaither had invested in, promoted, and launched. A week after the awards, English announced he had been having an affair with a fellow married gospel singer, Maribeth Jordan, of the group First Call. Both were married to other people. Both had conceived a child together. He had already resigned from the vocal band before the story became public. His label dropped him. Christian radio pulled his music. Bookstores removed his products from shelves. What followed was not a quiet withdrawal. English's life collapsed. Divorce, drug addiction. By the mid-1990s, the man who had stood at the top of gospel music was homeless. Bill Gaither had helped build that career. He had championed English before anyone outside the Southern gospel circuit knew his name. The scandal landed on the entire homecoming enterprise, and on Bill personally. The question it raised was one the gospel music world could not easily answer. What do you do when someone you vouched for publicly disgraces themselves? What does restoration actually look like in a genre built on grace? Bill's eventual answer was controversial. In 2009, he brought Michael English back into the Gaither vocal band, back onto the homecoming stages, back in front of the same audience that had watched the fall. Some fans never accepted it. Others called it the most gospel thing Bill Gaither had ever done. Lynda Randle watched all of this. She had joined the family in 1998, 4 years after the English scandal had reshaped the world she stepped into. She understood what it meant to operate inside a tradition that required you to be above reproach, where one wrong turn could end everything. Not everyone was comfortable with how her place in that world was being framed. A 2008 profile in Cross Rhythms, one of the most widely read Christian music publications in the world, captured the tension in its own headline. It described her as the Gaither homecoming friend and black gospel diva. 2 categories placed side by side without acknowledgement of what it meant to occupy both. Friend and diva. Homecoming and black. The article meant it as praise. But the phrasing named exactly what her position had always been. Celebrated on the platform. Categorized at the door. She kept her head down. She kept singing. She did not make the complexity the story. The Mahalia moment. In 2004, Lynda Randle did something that almost no Southern gospel artist would have attempted. She recorded an entire album paying tribute to Mahalia Jackson, the woman widely considered the greatest gospel singer who ever lived. The Queen of Gospel. A voice so large it had played Carnegie Hall and the March on Washington. A voice that had moved audiences for whom the stakes of the music were life and death, not just inspiration. The album won the GMA Dove Award for Traditional Gospel Album of the Year. That award was not a technicality. To win in that category with a Mahalia tribute was a statement about lineage, about whose tradition Lynda Randle stood in. The judges were effectively saying that a woman who grew up in the D.C. inner city, singing at Gaither homecoming events in front of predominantly white Southern gospel audiences, was the rightful heir to the most important voice in black sacred music history. That is not a small thing, and it was almost entirely ignored in the mainstream gospel conversation. She had stood on a Gaither homecoming stage as a guest in someone else's world. She had delivered the songs the way the format required. She had been received warmly but also at arm's length, the way any outsider is received by a tradition that was not built for them. The Mahalia Award said something that polite reception never did. It said she was not a guest. She was a carrier of something older and deeper than the homecoming format itself. She also performed at Billy Graham Crusades. She sang the national anthem for the Kansas City Royals. She appeared at Carnegie Hall alongside gospel legend Andre Crouch. She opened for Gladys Knight. She earned the first perfect score in the history of the GMA Music in the Rockies program. Any one of those credentials would define a career in the Christian music world. Most of her audience knew her as the woman who sang God on the Mountain at homecoming events. They did not know the full picture of what she had built or what she had survived to build it. Bill Gaither understood that. He kept inviting her back. He still did not say it out loud. What the silence cost. By the time Bill Gaither finally spoke, Lynda Randle had been connected to the Gaither brand for more than 25 years. She had sung at events that drew tens of thousands of people. She had the most watched video on the entire Gaither YouTube channel. She had won a Dove Award for an album that placed her in direct lineage from Mahalia Jackson. She had carried the song that got her through 5 family deaths to an audience of 88 million. And the man at the center of that world had never said publicly what she meant to him. Fan speculation filled the silence. Online communities asked questions that had no official answer. Was there a creative tension no one was discussing? Had something shifted behind the scenes that explained why the warmth on camera never made it into an interview? Others pushed back. They said not every meaningful relationship announces itself, that Bill's respect was visible in the consistent invitations, the prominent placements, the way he stepped back when she started to sing. Both things were true, and neither addressed the central fact. In a world where what Bill Gaither said about an artist could define their legacy, what he chose not to say carried its own weight. Words are what appear in tributes, in retrospectives, in the sentences that define a career once the performances are over. Bill had given those words to dozens of artists who had moved through the homecoming world. Lynda Randle, who had survived more loss than almost anyone in that world knew about, was still waiting. She waited without bitterness. She kept showing up. She founded an annual women's conference, wrote a book collecting testimonies about what God on the Mountain had meant in people's lives, released more than 20 albums and videos, and ran her own ministry out of Kansas City. All of it while rotating through the homecoming calendar as though the acknowledgement were secondary. For her, it probably was. But for the people watching, it was not. Bill finally speaks. Bill Gaither does not issue statements about feelings. For 25 years, what he thought of Lynda Randle was visible in what he did. He called her to his stages. He introduced her in arenas that held tens of thousands. He put her recordings on his platform and kept them there. He used her full name every time from the stage. Lynda Tate Randle. 3 names, the way you say a name when you want the audience to understand they are about to hear something worth remembering. He built 88 million views around her voice. Those who know them both have been less restrained. Respected voices in American Christianity and a figure in the Gaither world put his assessment on the official Gaither Music website. He called her one of the most talented and committed servants of Christ he had ever known. He said her testimony and voice combined to produce something that could not be manufactured. She does more than sing. She inspires. Michael Tate, who grew up in the same Washington, D.C. house and watched his sister carry everything this script has described, said it plainly on the same page. She was, he wrote, a landmark singer of our time. Fans who had followed the homecoming world for decades received those documented words the way long-delayed confirmation lands. Comment sections filled with people describing where they were when they first heard her sing. Nursing homes, hospital rooms, cars on highways at 2 in the morning when nothing else was on. One comment, shared hundreds of times, "We always knew." Hearing someone finally say it made it official. Old homecoming footage began recirculating with different commentary. The nod Bill gave after a strong performance. The way he stepped back when she stepped forward. The quiet that fell over the room before her voice came up. All of it had been visible for 25 years. What had been missing was the sentence. Bill Gaither recently gave one. 3 words, spoken without decoration, the way he tends to speak the things he means most. I was blessed. Not a review of her talent. Not a theological statement. Just a man in his 80s, looking back at 60 years of stages and voices and rooms full of people who needed the music, and arriving at the simplest truth available. When Bill Gaither says he was blessed, Lynda Randle is part of what that means. Her voice is part of the evidence. Her 88 million views are part of the blessing he is naming. Her full name, Lynda Tate Randle, called from his stage for 25 years, is part of the sentence he finally finished. What his words meant Bill Gaither is in his 80s. He has been in gospel music for 60 years. he has watched the homecoming family lose people. His brother Danny died in 2001. Mary Ann, his original singing partner, died in 2018. He is the last surviving member of the original Gaither trio. Those losses mark a man, and people who know him say that in recent years he has moved into a season of saying the things that might otherwise go unsaid. His words about Lynda Randle fit that pattern. But there is something else worth noting. Bill Gaither is a man who brought Michael English back after a fall that would have ended most gospel careers permanently. He is a man who has watched people fail publicly and then extended a hand that was not required. When the documented record of what Evans and Tate said publicly landed alongside 25 years of Bill's consistent actions, it was not a simple compliment being acknowledged. It was an accumulated testimony from a man who has seen what failure looks like up close, who has watched people crumble under the weight of what the gospel world expects, and who recognized in Lynda something that had never bent. She had carried 2 years of grief, abuse, questions about her own identity, a mother dying 70 days before a concert she still showed up for. She had stood in a tradition that was not built for her and delivered the most watched moment in that tradition's entire history. And she had never made any of it the story. She had kept the story about the song. That is not a small discipline. Most artists who survived what she survived would have led with the struggle, would have made the valley the brand, would have put the grief front and center, and built a ministry around the testimony of loss. She chose differently. She let the song carry all of it, and she stayed out of the way. When Evans wrote that she inspires rather than merely sings, he was saying something precise. Not that she performs well, not that she has a rare vocal quality. He was saying that what she does on stage is not about her, that she has learned, the hard way and the long way, to get out of the way of the truth. That is a specific kind of anointing, and it costs something specific to develop. Bill Gaither knew what it cost. 25 years of watching it happen in front of him said as much as any interview ever could. A sister, a brother, her father, 2 uncles, her mother. Most people who have heard Lynda Randle sing had no idea what she was carrying. That is what 25 years of quiet faithfulness looks like from the outside. Did you know any of her story before today? And is there someone in your life carrying that kind of weight in silence right now, who has never heard someone say what they are worth? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.